Hi, my name's Delara. My sister's getting married, and I'm not invited, not forgotten, cut. After everything I did for her, they said, it's just a wedding. So I booked a trip, alone, to Tulum. Then the wedding fell apart. The groom walked out, the family panicked, and suddenly, I was the one they needed again. But where was that energy when they erased me from the guest list? What happens when the person they always counted on stops answering the phone? And what happens when silence is no longer weakness, but a decision? I was sipping lukewarm coffee in my tiny kitchen when the notification popped up on my phone. Just a quick ding, barely louder than the hum of the refrigerator. I almost didn't check, but my thumb moved anyway. It was a message from Marcy. My heart didn't drop, not yet. I was still in that stage where you think good news might be waiting. Some sort of update, maybe an invite, maybe even an apology about how busy she'd been. I tapped it open. We had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. Love you. I stared at the screen, like the words might rearrange themselves if I gave them enough time. Like maybe my name was still on the list, and this was some kind of mistake. Some text meant for someone else. But it wasn't. I read it again. Then again. Each time it got colder. Not invited. Not needed. Just cut. The next minute felt oddly silent. I couldn't hear the street outside, couldn't even hear myself breathing. The coffee sat in my hand, untouched, cooling further, like everything else. I didn't cry. That was the oddest part. There wasn't shock, not exactly. Just a spreading kind of numb. I pulled up my photo gallery, almost by instinct. Marcy and I as kids, sitting on the floor of our grandma's living room building forts out of sofa cushions. High school prom, where I'd done her makeup because she was too nervous her hands would shake. The night she showed up at my door after her breakup, sobbing, holding nothing but a garbage bag of her stuff and a broken heart. I had been there. When her lease fell through, it was me who took her in. When she couldn't make rent, it was me wiring her money from the little I had. Not for credit, not for thank yous. Just because that's what sisters do. Or so I thought. I put down the phone, finally, walked to the window and looked out without really seeing. The street hadn't changed. The neighbors were still doing yard work. The world hadn't noticed that I'd been deleted. But I had. It took me half an hour to decide to call Mom. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, voice light, like it was just another Tuesday. "I got a message from Marcy," I said, not wasting time. There was a pause. Tiny, but just long enough. "She says the guest list is finalized, and I'm not on it." Another pause. Then came the sigh. That damn sigh. "Honey," she said gently, "it's just a wedding. Don't make it a big deal." Just a wedding. Just. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm her only sister." She made a tisk noise, like I was being dramatic. "You know how these things go. Tight budgets. Venues have capacity limits. I'm sure it wasn't personal." But it was personal. I'd seen the Instagram story, one of Marcy's bridesmaids gushing over the 200 guests she'd just RSVP'd for. I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were steady, surprisingly so. But inside, something cracked. And it wasn't going to glue itself back together this time. "You knew," I said. Not a question. Mom didn't deny it, just sighed again. "Don't do this, Delara. It's just one day." No, it wasn't. It was every day I had shown up, every damn time I'd held her up, only to be invisible in the one moment she could have chosen to make me seen. I ended the call without saying goodbye. The apartment was too quiet. I didn't want music, didn't want a distraction. I just sat. Then, slowly, I stood and walked to my desk, opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, not replies, not explanations. I opened the browser, hovered over the travel tab. I typed in one word, escape. It autofilled to destinations, beaches, oceans, anywhere else. I clicked, not to run. Not yet. But I needed to remember there were places that didn't require an invitation, places where my name didn't need to be on someone's list. The script they kept rewriting, even if I bled to get my name in the margins. I didn't want to go, not really. But when Xenia casually mentioned Marcy's pre-wedding brunch was open to anyone who wanted to swing by, something in me shifted. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that I could still walk into a room full of people who had silently agreed I didn't matter, and not flinch. I arrived just after 10. Scottsdale was already warm, the kind of warmth that clings even before noon. I parked a few blocks away, partly because the lot was full, mostly because I didn't want to be seen pulling up. The venue was decorated with soft pinks, faux eucalyptus, and enough satin ribbons to choke a florist. As I stepped into the sunlit room, I didn't expect a parade, but the absence of any acknowledgement still cut. No one looked up. Not even a glance from the aunts I used to babysit for. They were too busy fussing over centerpieces and comparing retirement plans. Xenia gave me a brief nod from across the room, her face unreadable. I didn't head to the mimosa bar. I didn't need something bubbly to brace myself for what I already knew was coming. Against the far wall, they'd mounted a photo display. One of those Pinterest-inspired spreads with string lights and clothespins holding up glossy memories. Childhood birthdays, Halloween costumes, road trips, all curated to say, "Look how far she's come." I scanned the timeline. Dozens of moments frozen in time, but not one with me in them. The Thanksgiving in Tahoe? I planned that trip, booked the cabin, cooked the entire meal while Marcy cried over a guy who ghosted her 3 days before. There was a group shot from that weekend. I remember taking it, because no one else offered. And now, years later, it was framed and celebrated. Without me. I stood there longer than I meant to. Not stuck, just processing. It wasn't forgetfulness. This was precision. A clean cut. Xenia drifted toward me as I pretended to read the welcome sign by the entrance. "They printed the schedule," she said softly. "It's by the guest book table." I didn't want to look, but I did. The little folded cardstock menu listed everything from opening toasts to games with the bride. I skimmed until I found what I'd been quietly dreading. Opening remarks, Aunt Trinell. My name had once been there. Xenia told me last month that I'd say a few words, nothing formal, just a small note of support. I'd even drafted something. Now it was gone, replaced by a woman who once said, at a family reunion no less, "Dalara's the creative one, more decorative than dependable." Decorative. Like a throw pillow, like I was meant to make things look nice, not be anything of substance. I folded the card slowly, slid it back onto the table, and took a step back. The tension in my jaw didn't rise. My shoulders didn't tighten. This wasn't a new wound, just salt in a very old one. I found a chair along the edge of the room and settled in. No one offered me coffee. No one asked why I was there. A cousin bumped my chair walking by and didn't stop or say anything. It was like I'd mastered invisibility. But not on purpose. Marcy came in a few minutes later. She looked good. Hair curled, dress expensive and simple. She waved at someone behind me. I didn't turn to see who. She never looked my way. Maybe she saw me. Maybe she didn't. But that was the thing. I was no longer interested in reading into every moment, searching for signs of care where none existed. Xenia approached again as a tray of mini quiches floated by, carried by a young woman in black slacks and tired shoes. "I don't know why they didn't include you," she whispered. I didn't look at her, just kept my gaze on the brunch table across the room. "Because," I said, "if I disappear quietly, it's easier for them to rewrite the story." She said nothing. A breeze from the air vent stirred a napkin off the table near us. I watched it flutter to the ground like a flag lowered after a battle no one admitted was lost. I stayed 15 more minutes. Not long enough to be polite, not short enough to be accused of bitterness. As I walked back out into the heat, the door clicked behind me, not loud, but final. This wasn't about being left out anymore. It was about realizing I'd never really been let in. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize peace doesn't come free. Not when you've silenced the one who built it. I didn't hear from anyone for 2 days after the brunch. No calls, no texts, not even a "thanks for showing up" message from Xenia. I wasn't surprised. I think that's what hit the hardest. It didn't feel new. It felt expected. On the third day, Xenia called. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, she texted. "Hey, they're short on hands for the rehearsal dinner setup. Marcy's freaking out. Would you mind coming by?" I stared at the screen. I could have said no. I should have. But the part of me that still tried to be decent, the part that hadn't fully learned the cost of saying yes to people who didn't see me, typed back, "Sure, what time?" I showed up before most of them did. Tables were still stacked, chairs half draped with white cloth. A few hired staff were rearranging centerpieces and taping down extension cords. I didn't expect a greeting, and I didn't get one. Xenia waved vaguely from across the room. Marcy wasn't there yet. I found the seating chart in a cardboard box labeled Final Printouts. I began organizing place cards, grouping them by table, laying them out neatly on a long side table near the windows. I was halfway through when one of Marcy's cousins, Bryce, maybe Brandon, I never kept them straight, walked up, handed me a silver tray of flutes, and said, "Hey, could you take these around?" He didn't ask. He didn't even glance at me long enough to register who I was. Just assumed. I took the tray. Because what else was I going to do? Create a scene? I walked the room like I was paid to be invisible. People smiled, took glasses, barely made eye contact. A woman in a red wrap dress stopped me. "Wow, you're really good at this. I didn't know Marcy hired professionals this year." "She didn't," I said, flat as drywall. She blinked, gave a polite "oh," and turned back to her conversation. I set the tray down on a sideboard and stepped outside to breathe. The heat was high but dry, the kind that makes your thoughts bake into something more solid. I leaned against the side of the building, staring at the asphalt like it might tell me what I was still doing there. Back inside, I noticed a thick guest list had been left inside the chart folder. I wasn't looking for it. It just caught my eye. It wasn't stapled, no cover sheet, just printed names, table numbers. A lot of them. I started skimming. Co-workers from 3 jobs ago, neighbors from our old cul-de-sac in Chandler. Some high school friend I hadn't heard from in years. A girl who once sold Marcy skincare products at the mall. And me? Not on it, not misspelled, not relocated, not a backup, just not there. It wasn't just that I wasn't invited. It was that they never even had to make the decision. I was never part of the conversation, never an option that had to be weighed. I placed the papers back neatly, smoothed the edges, then walked to the bathroom just so I could close a door and breathe. Inside the mirror's frame, I looked like someone who should have known better by now. Hair pulled back, sweat prickling at my temple, eyes sharper than they used to be. I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone. The flight search from earlier was still open. I hadn't closed the tab. This time, I typed Tulum. Packages, resorts, oceanfront, first-class upgrade, nonstop, Phoenix to Cancun. I didn't book yet. I just kept the window open, letting the idea settle. Back in the main hall, Marcy had arrived. She stood near the head table, smiling at guests like she belonged in a bridal magazine. Her laughter sounded too loud, a little too rehearsed. When she glanced in my direction, she looked past me. That was the moment I knew. They'd written a story, one where I didn't exist, and no matter how many times I showed up, I wasn't part of the plot. I was a crew member, not cast. I left the room quietly. No scene, no sound. At my car, I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I opened notes on my phone, typed one sentence. Apparently, some guest lists are allergic to memory. I didn't post it, not yet, but it sat there, waiting, just like I had for too long. This time, I won't just walk out. I'll walk into something better, without turning around. The next morning, I got a call from Mom. It was early, before 9, and that alone was enough to make my stomach turn. She never called unless something was broken, bleeding, or about to embarrass her in public. "Delara," she began. "Not even a good morning. I thought we could grab dinner. Just us. No fuss." The silence that followed was heavy. Not quite guilt, not quite affection, but that hollow, familiar mix of obligation and strategic kindness. I said yes, not because I wanted reconciliation. I just wanted the record straight, at least once. We met at a small restaurant near the art district, the kind of place with soft jazz overhead and waiters too young to know when a smile is forced. She was already seated when I arrived, sipping from a water glass, her phone face down like it was some kind of grand gesture. "You look tired," she said, scanning my face. "Are you sleeping okay?" "Fine." It was the kind of conversation where everything polite was code for something else. She waved off the waiter when he offered menus. "Let's just talk for a bit first." And then, as if reading from a cue card, she said, "I wanted to say thank you." I blinked. She continued, "For what you did for Marcy last year, helping her get back on her feet. We wouldn't have been able to book the venue so early without that." I tilted my head, slowly. "Excuse me?" She took another sip, avoiding my eyes. "The money. That transfer you sent her when she lost her job. It really saved us." My stomach dropped in that quiet, controlled way that doesn't look like drama, but feels like betrayal. The deposit, the down payment, the foundation of the wedding came from me, and not a word of that had ever been said aloud. Not in Marcy's thank you speech, not in the planning emails, not even in the tough cuts text. I pushed my fork gently across the tablecloth. "So the wedding is partly funded by the person not invited to it." She gave a weak chuckle, the kind that people use when they realize they're cornered. "It's complicated, honey. You know how things go." "Yeah," I said. "I do." We finished the meal in quiet snippets. Nothing warm, nothing hostile. Just two people carefully walking around the same wound, pretending not to see it bleeding on the floor. As we left the restaurant, the humidity clung to my skin like something I couldn't rinse off. And of course, as if fate was feeling cruel, we ran into Aunt Trinell outside the front doors. "Well, look who finally came to something," she quipped, her perfume trailing a step ahead of her. I smiled tightly. "Evening." She turned to Mom, ignoring me. We were all wondering what she'd show up for. Not like she's on the program or anything. Mom let out one of those half laughs, the kind you use when you know someone's being rude, but you're too spineless to stop it. Trinell wasn't finished. "No offense, Delara. You're just not really the centerpiece type." I stared at her, then at my mother, who still hadn't spoken. Then I said it. Calm, even. "That's funny," I said, "since I'm the one who paid for the table you'll all be sitting at." Trinell blinked. Mom opened her mouth, probably to smooth it over, but I raised a hand. "No," I said. "I'm not asking for applause. I'm just telling you both. This is the last moment you'll ever be able to pretend I wasn't part of all of this." Mom shook her head, her voice flat. "That's not what she meant." I know exactly what she meant. I always have. And I've always stayed quiet so the rest of you could be comfortable, but not anymore. Neither of them responded. And that silence? It wasn't discomfort. It was confirmation. By the time I got back to my car, my heart wasn't racing. I wasn't even angry anymore. I opened my notes app. You can't buy a seat at a table that was never meant to face you. I stared at the line, then copied it, and pasted it into a browser search bar, just to feel like I was taking one small action toward leaving. Then I booked the flight. Tulum, 5 nights, ocean view, solo. This time, it wasn't about getting away. It was about refusing to pay for a front row seat to my own erasure. I left my house before sunrise. The flight wasn't until noon, but I needed space. Space between the silence at that dinner table and the life I still hadn't figured out how to claim. I packed light. Just a carry-on, a tote, and my piece. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them one. At the gate, I ordered a coffee I wouldn't finish and sat by the window, letting the low buzz of the terminal drown out my thoughts. I took out my phone, opened my photo gallery, and picked a picture from the first-class lounge. Legs up, cocktail glass on the table, a sliver of runway in the background. I added a caption, "Got excluded, guess I'll survive." Posted, no tags, no filters, no hashtags. I switched my phone to airplane mode and tucked it away. That post wasn't meant for replies. It was a statement. Not about the wedding, about me. They didn't know it yet, but I had just rewritten the opening line to my side of the story. The plane boarded on time. Window seat 2A. No one next to me. The champagne came before takeoff. I sipped slowly, watching the city shrink beneath the clouds. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see behind me. Halfway through the flight, I turned my phone on for a moment, just long enough to check the notifications. There were over 40, not likes, comments, screenshots, shares. A few cousins sent laughing emojis. One of my aunts, the only one I still respected, replied, "Good for you, finally." Xenia had seen it. That little read timestamp sat beside her name like a fingerprint. No comment, no message, just seen. Funny thing about silence. When you're used to it, you stop expecting sound, but you notice who stays quiet when it would have cost them nothing to speak. I turned the phone back off. When we landed in Cancun, the heat met me like an open hand. Not striking, but warm and full. A driver held a sign with my last name. "Ms. Reza," he said, holding the door. For once, someone got the name right and didn't ask how to pronounce it. The resort wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. The lobby opened wide into a courtyard with vines hanging over white stucco walls. They handed me a cool towel, a fresh glass of sparkling water with lime, and a key card to a room with an ocean view. As I stepped into the suite, I paused. It was quiet. Not like my apartment quiet, not lonely. This was stillness, a blank page. I took off my shoes. My feet hit the marble floor like an anchor hitting earth. I walked out to the balcony. Salt in the air. A breeze that didn't ask questions. Waves I didn't have to earn. That evening, I sat alone on a lounge chair facing the water. The sky turned the color of pressed peaches and soft clay. I didn't check my phone again. I didn't need to. I was done waiting for people to notice what I carried. I was done reminding them. I opened my notes app, not to post, just to write. One for Marcy. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I just won't be one of the tools you use to get there." One for Mom. "You raised 2 daughters, but only one of us learned how to listen." One for Xenia. "Silence is a kind of answer. I've heard yours loud and clear." I didn't send any of them. Not out of fear, out of understanding. They didn't deserve a last word from me. The next morning, I ordered room service. Fruit, eggs, coffee that finally tasted like something. I put on a sundress, pulled my hair into a low bun, and walked down to the spa. I booked a massage, then scheduled a boat ride for the afternoon. I wasn't keeping busy to avoid feeling. I was keeping promises to myself that I'd postponed for years. Later that day, I posted one more photo. My feet in the sand, umbrella casting shade across my lap, a daiquiri melting slowly in my hand. The caption read, "When one door closes, open the one that doesn't require permission to walk through." I turned off notifications after that. I didn't need their replies, their reactions. I wasn't avoiding them anymore. I was indifferent. I didn't go to escape them. I went to meet the version of me they'd never allow in the room. So when I disappeared, they finally remembered, and not for the reasons they hoped. The ocean had its own clock. No alarms, no urgency. Just tides that came and went, with or without permission. That morning, I sipped coffee on the balcony while the sun began peeling itself off the horizon. The air smelled like salt and citrus, like something freshly cut and clean. I felt clear too. Not healed, but uninterrupted. I opened Instagram out of habit, not expectation. The first thing I saw was a photo, Marcy, standing in the old apartment, the one she'd cried about when she couldn't afford to stay. The kitchen tiles still chipped. Same curtains I bought from Target. The ones she said were too bland, until they matched the ones from a lifestyle blog she followed. The caption read, "Where it all started. No safety net, no shortcuts, just grit, just me." A heart emoji, a fire emoji, 100 comments. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I didn't believe what I was reading, but because I did. There it was, the final revision of our story. One where I never existed. One where the friend who loaned her rent money, the sister who paid her storage unit fees, the woman who quietly wired $15,000 while she whispered, "I'll pay you back when I can," had been cropped out of the frame like a mistake in a draft that never made it to print. I didn't feel rage. I felt something sharper. The clarity of insult dressed up as inspiration. I locked my phone and placed it face down. An hour later, it buzzed. Then again. And again. When I finally checked, I saw 5 missed calls. Mom, Marcy, Xenia, 2 others listed as unknown. A voicemail came in from Aunt Lisa. "Sweetheart, I don't know where you are, but Emily's a mess. The rehearsal dinner's a disaster. She won't stop crying. People are talking." I played it once. Then came a text from Marcy. "Please call me. You always fix things. I need you." That was the one that made me laugh. Not out loud. Just a puff of disbelief that stayed in my throat. They didn't need me. They needed the version of me who swallowed every insult, every slight, and still showed up on time with a cake or a first aid kit. They needed the person who never made them sit in the mess they'd made. I opened the family group chat, still intact from holidays past and present. I typed, "You excluded me. Now I exclude myself from fixing this." Sent. Then I left the group. No punctuation, no elaboration, just a full stop. I didn't wait for reactions. I didn't check who'd read it. For once, it didn't matter if they clapped, cried, or cussed. It was no longer my emergency to tend to. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the water. Waded in, ankle deep, the sand shifting under my feet. I let the breeze push my dress around my legs and felt something unburdened loosen in my chest. I thought about writing a response to the Instagram post. A comment like, "You had help. You just decided to forget her." But I didn't. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "I didn't leave to punish them. I left because I was exhausted from asking to be seen before being used." It wasn't bitterness. It was finally recognizing that proximity and love weren't the same thing. That sometimes, the people who say they miss you are just mourning your utility. I breathed deeply, let the ocean wash over my calves, and stood still. The resort staff waved from the shoreline as they prepped for the evening beach dinner. One of them motioned toward the excursion desk, and I smiled, nodding. I'd booked a snorkeling trip for the next morning. A first. That evening, Xenia called. I didn't answer. No guilt, no weight, just choice. I turned on Do Not Disturb. My last draft of the day was short. I typed it in my notes app while sitting under a palm tree, the light fading behind the hills. Sometimes disappearing is the most honest reply you can give. And for once, I meant every word of it. But by then, you've already built a life that doesn't revolve around their memory. The morning before Marcy's wedding, I woke up before the alarm. Not from anxiety, that had long since burned out, but from the light spilling through the balcony doors. The breeze carried the scent of lime trees and ocean salt, grounding me in a kind of calm that didn't require forgiveness or permission. I stretched, wandered over to the small patio table, and opened my phone. I wasn't expecting peace, but I wasn't bracing for anything either, just checking the world like someone skimming headlines they're no longer part of. And there it was. A message from Marcy, timestamped 6:42 a.m. "Hey, can I have the necklace back? It belonged to Grandma. I want to wear it tomorrow." No, please. No, hope you're well. Not even a hello. The necklace wasn't our grandmother's. It wasn't a family heirloom. It was something I bought during the year Marcy could barely afford groceries, the year she stayed in my guest room and called herself a burden between sobs. I had saved up for that piece, not because she needed jewelry, but because I thought it might make her feel worth something again. I stared at the message. It wasn't about the necklace, it was about control. One more request made under the assumption that I'd still fold the way I used to. I set the phone down and went to the closet. The necklace was in a velvet pouch tucked beside my passport. I brought it to the front desk, asked for shipping assistance. The concierge smiled. "Would you like to include a note?" "No, thank you," I replied. "Just send it." He didn't ask anything else. He handed me a tracking receipt, and I slipped it into my journal without a second glance. Back in the room, I made tea, sat by the balcony, took a deep breath. A few hours later, I checked Instagram. I hadn't planned to, but the red circle on Marcy's profile was hard to ignore. A photo had been posted. Marcy again, in our old kitchen. Same apartment, same cabinets, same counter where I used to unpack groceries while she vented about temp jobs and broken friendships. The caption read, "Started from nothing, no shortcuts, no help, just me." The comments poured in like confetti. "You're incredible, girl." "Resilient queen." "Proof you don't need anybody but yourself." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. But I did feel the kind of cold that makes you see clearer, not colder. The kind that makes you remember instead of react. I didn't comment. I didn't correct. I wrote instead. They were never angry because I left. They were angry because I stopped being convenient. The truth didn't need an audience. It just needed to be said. To myself, if no one else. That night, I walked the beach barefoot. The waves rolled in with their own steady rhythm, uncaring and unbothered. I took a photo of my silhouette against the water, a shadow in motion. The caption I typed beneath it was simple. They wanted an assistant, not a witness. I posted it. No tags, no explanation. Let them draw their own conclusions. My phone buzzed an hour later. A voice memo. From my cousin Derek, the one who always stayed neutral until it benefited him not to. His voice was hushed like he was recording it from a closet. "Del, everything's falling apart here. I think they're realizing you were the glue. Marcy's freaking out and Mom's blaming the DJ. It's a mess. You were right." I didn't save the message. I didn't even listen to it a second time. I deleted it, then went to my settings and turned on permanent Do Not Disturb. I poured myself a drink, sat under the cabana, listened to the waves without checking anything else. Sometimes people don't reach for you because they miss you. They reach because they can no longer use you. And that, I had finally learned, was not a reason to come back. The air that evening in Tulum felt thicker, not from the heat, but from something quietly shifting inside me. I'd already made peace with the distance between me and them. But peace, as I was learning, doesn't mean numb. It just means done. The sun had barely risen when I opened my eyes. I sat up slowly, took a deep breath, and reached for my phone, not to scroll, not to react, just to check the time. Instead, I saw 14 missed calls, most from unknown numbers, one from Xenia, two from Marcy, and a single file attachment sitting quietly in my inbox with no subject line, no accompanying message. I opened it. The video was grainy, handheld. Someone had recorded Marcy's birthday years ago, back when we still did backyard dinners and ice cream sheet cakes. The camera wobbled for a moment before settling on Marcy, holding a paper plate and laughing too loud. Then, mid-bite, she looked into the lens and said, "Honestly, I've always been a little jealous of Delara. She just walks in and everyone listens. I wish I had that." The words weren't meant to hurt, but they did. Not because they revealed something new, but because they confirmed what had always gone unsaid. I was never invisible. I was inconvenient. That clip, that offhand comment from a version of Marcy I barely remembered, said more than any apology ever had. I closed the video and saved it under a new name, Perspective. I didn't reply to Xenia. That afternoon, I took myself to lunch, sat at a corner table near the edge of the patio where the ocean breeze reached me without competition, ordered shrimp ceviche and a glass of white wine. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed again. A message from Xenia. The groom left, mid-reception, after a blowout with Marcy. Apparently, she lied about something. He just walked out. Another message followed. Mom tried calling him. His mother said, "This is your problem now." And one more, short but sharp. They're blaming you, saying if you'd been there, you could have stopped it. I put the phone down, face down, and folded my napkin carefully across my lap. Blaming me for not saving them from themselves. That was always the pattern, wasn't it? They shattered the glass, handed me the broom, then got mad when I asked why I was the only one sweeping. But I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel smug. I felt free. I paid the check, thanked the server, and walked along the shoreline barefoot. The sand was still warm from the day, the waves quieter now. I wasn't thinking anymore, just moving forward without needing to explain where I was headed. They were spiraling, and I wasn't their anchor anymore. That evening, I booked a sunset dinner for one. No table number, no place card, just my name and a reservation. As I sat down beneath the hanging lanterns, the sky bruised itself into soft purples and golds. I pulled out my phone and rewatched the video clip Xenia had sent. I paused it right after Marcy said, "I don't get it. People just love her." This time, I didn't flinch. I didn't analyze. I just saved the clip again, this time captioning it for myself. Not proof, just peace. That was the difference now. I wasn't collecting ammunition. I was collecting understanding, not so I could fight, but so I could stop fighting. I took one final picture, just the wine glass, the flicker of the candle, and the tip of my foot in the corner. No face, no smile, just presence. The caption I typed came easily. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it falling apart. I posted it and turned the screen dark. Later, back in my suite, I packed slowly. The flight wasn't until morning, but I folded each item with care, as if honoring the space it once held. I wasn't returning to anything. I was arriving at something. And for once, I didn't feel the need to tell anyone what that was. I left the curtains open that last morning. The ocean was quieter, the light softer, as if even the sun understood I didn't need grand gestures. Just space, just a clean edge to close this chapter against. No new texts, no calls, no pinging notifications from people who had once demanded immediate access to every inch of me. Silence, but not the heavy kind. This one felt like my own voice coming back. I made coffee in the room, barefoot on tile, my bag already zipped and sitting by the door. My flight was in 6 hours. I still had time. But there was no urgency, no last-minute backpedaling, no what-ifs circling in my chest. I didn't check Instagram until I finished breakfast. Xenia had sent one final message. "They've stopped talking. About you. About the wedding. But I wanted you to know. I saw it happen. And I was wrong for staying quiet." That was it. No deflection. No excuses. I didn't respond. But I didn't delete it either. Some messages don't ask for forgiveness. They offer clarity. And that was enough. Around noon, while sipping the last of my coffee on the terrace, I noticed a tagged post trending. I tapped it open. Marcy, in a carefully edited photo. Her hair perfectly curled, standing in front of a bare arch at what looked like a last-minute private reception. The caption read, "We thank everyone who stood by us. Every family has its challenges. Please respect our privacy moving forward." The comments were the opposite of respectful. Wait, wasn't the groom the one who left? Respect your privacy? After that circus? And you still didn't invite your sister? Wild! I scrolled for a few seconds, then turned it off. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even amused. It was just noise. And I'd finally stopped needing to turn my head toward every sound. I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched since the flight here. The pages still carried a slight bend from the humidity, as if even paper softened in this place. On a blank page, I wrote, "I was not the forgotten daughter. I was the erased witness. And now, I write myself back in." I paused. Let the words sit, then added, "This version of me doesn't need to explain how she survived. She simply lives. No audience, no validation, just a truth that didn't require defending anymore." After I closed the journal, I stood and stretched, checked my room once more. Nothing left behind but the scent of sunscreen and peace. At the front desk, the concierge smiled. "Come back soon, Ms. Reza." I nodded gently. "Maybe, but if I do, it won't be as the same woman who checked in." Outside, the breeze greeted me like an old friend. My suitcase rolled lightly behind me on the stone pathway. I didn't feel heavy anymore, because none of this was weight I was meant to carry for life. I paused at the car, took out my phone, and opened my drafts one last time. There was one final caption I'd written days ago, never posted. Some stories aren't told in chapters, they're told in exits. I didn't post it today either. Some things didn't need to be said. Some things were just lived. I stepped into the car, shut the door, and let the silence wrap itself around me. Not empty, just full of everything I had finally made space for.